Yes. Okay, so I will explain this piece of artwork before we go any further and say that one of the wikis that we're going to be looking at later is a Chinese wiki, and one of the members of the Chinese team, in fact two of the members of the Chinese team, are gifted artists, and so we wanted to encourage cooperation between the two language wikis, the Norwegian Wiki and the Bridge to China, which is the Chinese one. And so the artist drew this picture, which is the polar bear and the panda in full cooperation, as you can see. So that's the story behind that. I'll just do some introductions, more for the audio than for other reasons, I suppose. I'm Chris Dillon, and I'm a research associate in digital humanities. Now, this is Margareta Alexandroni, teaching fellow in Norwegian. And this is Bin Chien Tsai, who is an MA student in the same digital humanities, in fact, and she's been helping with the Bridge to China. Okay, well, before we plunge into the wiki side of this, I'm going to give a brief brief talk about what the Digital Linguist Network is, because as I said earlier, this is the first event, and so we should really define why are we doing it. Well, the main reason for that is that UCL and UCL including CEAS, UCL, CEAS and SOAS put together are the world's leading linguistic resource when it comes to research and language teaching. So here, the last time, I think Itesh used to give that statistic, and I haven't heard a new one. He used to talk about 82 languages. It's probably, if anything, crept up, because there's been talk of things like Portuguese, which wasn't as strong when that statistic was set up. So the nearest competitor in the world is doing about 27 or 28. So we're not only the leading centre, we are the leading centre by a very long way. And moreover, there are probably some people in this room who are not connected to any of those. So there are other very major networks of linguists in London, and they include the Foreign Office, who they have a large number of linguists. Westminster University, certainly, King's Imperial, and possibly Imperial to a lesser extent these days. So it is quite an extraordinary situation, and so we felt really what we want to do is get as many of those linguists to come together often and to share all sorts of ideas. There are quite a few areas where we can do that. In fact, if I jump forward, maybe that makes a little bit more sense. Whoops, that's not where I want to be going. I think I've lost a slide. I have lost a slide. This is an old version. Never mind, I shall have to remember. So this is the case that probably quite a lot of people know about is the Domain Names Project. Quite a few of you here were involved with that, and that was a network taken from all of those locations was used to have a look at the new generation of domain names in all sorts of scripts. So that was a big project, and it went well, and the likelihood is that we'll be doing more of it. But there are also things like publishing. So and publishing these days comes in several forms. So it might be electronic publishing, or it could be paper. It's much easier to publish than it ever has been, and so that might be another event. I think possibly quite soon as well. And then also, before this, there was the Settle, the Settle Centre used to meet, and that talked a lot about pedagogy, and every now and then we may do that and talk about pedagogy, so there's some overlap. Other things could be conceivably translation, and it wouldn't be sort of probably not so much book translation, but it might be translating apps or creating apps, grammar apps, that sort of thing. So that would be another area. Then cultural advice, that would be sort of rather like in CEAS there is a database called Sealbass, and that's basically a database of experts, so it might be that sort of thing. So this network could operate in that kind of way. And last but not least, public engagement. So it is actually conceivably using this network to send people out and actually say, look at what's going on here, look at the languages you can do and where you can do them. So that's the why. It's rather a long why, but well, and the what in fact. When? Well, when becomes completely impossible, because it's very, very difficult to find a convenient time for a large number of people. And so I stole a time. The Settle event used to be 5:15 on a Wednesday, and that seemed to be the time that was easiest to do things, and so that's what I'm intending to do. This is the only event of this term, but optimistically perhaps I'm intending to run one a month next term. As I say, probably at 5:15 on a Wednesday, unless a large number of people twist my arm. But I'm quite keen to keep that time. Rather a long preamble, but anyway, it puts the thing in context. And we should. Of course, I then had the other problem. So I wanted to do things to keep this network together, for all sorts of things in the future, all sorts of reasons. And I thought, well, how on earth do you start? Which would be the first one? And at that point, I heard that Margrethe Alexandroni, with whom I had worked on the Norwegian Wiki, was about to retire. So, well, in fact, it's probably the wrong word to use anyway, the way things are going. But I thought, that's actually decided it. That we cannot possibly allow somebody, not to be around perhaps as much as before without showing what had been going on and really telling the story of what was of what is the Norwegian Wiki, and also we'll be talking about Bridge to China, which is the Chinese Wiki, which I should explain. Well, we're sort of heading into the next part of this now, but the Norwegian one started in 2008. The Chinese one started in December last year, so they're quite different beasts in several senses. But anyway, I think, yes, I don't think I've missed anything out. I think we can now safely come out of this and just go over and actually have a look at the main reason for being here today. And can everybody actually see that? I think we may try, maybe that's a little easier. So in my last job, I was involved with setting up a wiki in UCL, and I guess I did that because I've always been a compulsive note taker. I take notes on absolutely everything, and I love structuring notes and all of that sort of stuff. And I'd used that wikis and note taking programs in, for various things, the IT stuff and language stuff, and I just became keener and keener, and so they gave me this project and we set it up. And so the Norwegian one was really a result of my having run out of Norwegian materials as I was learning Norwegian. They're very expensive as well if you buy Norwegian materials from Norway. And so I was keen to get hold of more Norwegian materials, and so I approached Margareta, and she said, "Oh, that's very interesting. Maybe it's time to change the speaker." What happened at that point?
Well, sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah,
it should be fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, what happened? It was that I've been teaching Norwegian for a number of years, longer than I really care to remember. And I joined UCL in 1993. But right from the start, when I started teaching Norwegian, I found that the Norwegian teaching material was very badly suited for people learning Norwegian abroad. Because in Norwegian, the ethos is that it should be language plus Norwegian life and society. And by life and society, it's really geared at immigrants and refugees who come to Norway. And this is probably not typical Norwegian. But, you can't have a Norwegian textbook without equal emphasis on life and society and language. And for the students here, it wasn't all that interesting to read about Richard's funeral and, confirmation parties. And parents' evening, what to say to the teacher during the parents' evening, and the mother having to bake a cake for the parents' evening, and it was all like that. So I like writing anyway, and creative writing is really my biggest interest. So I started writing my own pieces. And another thing, a shortcoming in the Norwegian teaching material, that when they introduce a new grammatical structure, you might find this structure used maybe 3 times in the text. But there was a lot about making sandwiches for the children for school, and the father doing his bit and things like that, to teach the poor Muslims that the man should also do his bit around the house. That was, it's quite patronizing, really. So I said, I don't want any of that. And that's how it came about. I started doing my own texts. And then I started doing my own grammatical exercises, and this went on for a number of years. And the students liked it. They enjoyed my texts because they were quite imaginative. And there could be murders, there could be ghosts, a lot of polar bear stories. And the students also were encouraged to do creative writing, because my pieces were quite creative, and so that kind of inspired the students, because my idea was that you could make language learning more fun. Even though it was text-based, it could still be more fun than the traditional material. And in the end, I had a lot of floppy disks with all sorts of things on it, and they became obsolete. And Chris managed to convert them. And then, we started really working seriously on the wiki, and, we organized it very nicely. I think you could talk more about the organization of it.
I mean, it was actually relatively easy, because there was this corpus of wonderful texts. They were very funny. They were just, actually, from a totally selfish point of view, they were exactly what I was looking for, I suppose. And so it was very, because they were all ready, it was just a matter of transferring them into the wiki environment. And so that was really the start of the Norwegian wiki. The Chinese one developed completely differently. This is one of the big differences. And so what then needed to be done was sort of adding elements like the morphology, the grammar, the dictionary, and also recordings and exercises. So we really went through systematically, and so each passage would have a vocabulary added to it. The vocabulary would then be put in the dictionary. Maybe it's time to show.
Yes.
It's much more fun to show than speak about it. I'll just log into this thing.
And also, we didn't have an artist, and I'm not really a drawing artist, so we made sure that we had a Norwegian photo at the beginning of each chapter. But as we are working with it now, we will add drawings as well to liven it up, and also that can explain a lot of grammar. So.
Okay, so there is really quite a mixture of texts here, but I suppose this is the one there isn't actually a recording for this one, but here you can see one of Margrethe's stories, which actually has original pictures in it, and then at the end typically the vocabulary. It's quite rigorous, so if you've got a word which is irregular, the irregularities are pointed out. Then also, maybe we need to go a bit further up.
And that's beginner texts for those who don't know Norwegian well enough.
Yes, we tried to organise them roughly by level of difficulty, and then the grammar here. I mean, the wikis are great for this because you see it even more with the Chinese wiki. You can start off with something, and actually this is it's actually rather a nice example. Binqian works on Chinese measure words. So in Chinese, you can't actually say something like 3 cows, you have to say 3 head of cattle. So the whole time, whenever you're counting something, you have to know what the measure word is. And in the Chinese wiki, I'll show you a little later, you click on measure words and it just goes bang like this. You've got lots and lots of these things, and you're just not worried about space anymore. You can put as many examples and as much explanation as you like. You're completely free.
Yes. And those perhaps, and
so this is really exactly what you'd expect. I mean, something like verbs, you're going to expect the conjugations to come up, strong verbs, and grammatical terminology. We're not courageous enough to think that everybody knows what a verb is. Tenses. Yeah. I mean, as you can imagine, it's extremely structured as an approach, and both the wikis are very much example based. So I think the tendency is in the Norwegian one for the examples, usually they're texts. I think the Norwegian one is it's a higher course, it's more difficult, because with the Chinese one we can't presume anything. You really have to start with really very, very simple things, whereas the Norwegian one does have the texts.
Yes.
Then exercises, usually sort of hot potato exercises. The students are very, oh no, that's something else, isn't it? But there are lots of hot potato exercises in here. Probably never not find.
No, you found it in the grammar section. It's at the bottom there.
That one.
No. Go back. No, you need to go back to the menu. Let's go back there.
I've gone too far up.
Here you have it.
Ah, yeah.
Should
okay.
be.
Probably in grammar.
Yeah. There you have it.
One of the joys of working in a wiki is that you can really model things. Some people use the words schemata, but you can model things any way you want. So one person will say, oh, well, this thing should be with that. With the wiki, you can actually link everything to everything else. You know, you don't have to use one particular logic. You can really use any logic. We've got a lot of these.
Oh yes, and I'm going to make more. Because also, as it is an ongoing piece of work, I see what's needed, and when I see the problem, students have a problem with a certain structure, then it's quite easy then to knock up an exercise. And next time I see them, there you are. You can try this one. So it's a very, very easy medium to work with.
That was probably one of the reasons why it was chosen. I mean, one of the reasons was this sort of incredible hierarchical structure, which, you know, with languages, I think there are pedagogical reasons for doing that. It possibly mirrors the way the brain's working with language. I feel that quite strongly. But yes, the learning curve is very shallow. So once the access rights are set up, and that doesn't take very long, then you can put content into the system as quickly as you can type. Yes.
Is that true with hot potatoes as well?
Hot potatoes are also straightforward, in fact, because all you do with the hot potatoes is you set up your close exercise and then just use the export as HTML option, and then it goes straight in the wiki. Now, there are other systems which also will allow hot potatoes, and they have an advantage because the other systems sometimes will keep track of the markings. The wiki doesn't do that. But then, to be honest, I don't know how you feel about that. I don't think that's very important.
No, not really, no.
I mean, the main thing is, okay, I made a mistake. Do I understand why I made the mistake or not? That's the key thing.
So you spent a lot of time on feedback on hot potatoes?
Well, yes. You have to give them the right solution. That's quite important. Because otherwise, they wouldn't know if they have done it right or wrong. So, take some time, but once you get used to it, it's really quite quick. You know, it's just a few things you need to learn and internalize and get used to, and then it doesn't take long, really.
Sometimes there were things which you might expect to be quite dull. I mean, let's come out and say it. I mean, like creating a dictionary. You had quite an interesting experience with the dictionary. So you go first. I had another, so I'll go after.
No, it's because it looks extremely dull when you see the vocabulary to each text, and then you have to put each word into the dictionary, an alphabetical dictionary. Maybe you could show it.
Well, that sounds like a very good idea.
That's much easier when you show it. It's at the beginning, opening page, I think. Yes, Norwegian. That should be a dictionary. There you are.
We'll go for S.
Yes. And where have we got it now? Oh, you got it already. Yeah, and as you can see, in Norwegian, as in all other languages, a lot of letters start in S. But if you go to Y, you can do.
Y is a lonely letter.
Yes. Yeah, there you are. All the 4 words. And, you know, it's sort of strangely satisfying because you see the lists growing, and then when you find a word on Y, you think, wow, I found a word on Y, and then it sounds very weird and perhaps pathetic. I found a word starting with Y. And you get the sense of achievement out of it. And it's like one of those things that's quite addictive once you get started, because, you know, it's like, it's nice to see it growing, you know. So I have enjoyed doing the dictionary, and I shall enjoy doing more of it, because we are going to add other pieces. As it stands now, it's not meant for complete beginners. It's meant for people who already have some knowledge of Norwegian. Very, very low intermediates to higher intermediates,
yes.
I would say.
Yes, yes.
And the question now is, do we rewrite it so that it becomes a complete beginner's course? That is what we possibly will do.
Mm.
And also another project which I really have in mind is to just take the texts and the dictionary and make a little, like an easy reading book for students. It could be online, it could be a paper book.
I think there is no doubt that the approach really lends itself to the creation of textbooks, and this is why at the beginning I was talking about publishing. So, you know, it's quite easy to take stuff out of a wiki and create a textbook or create perhaps an app, and those, you know, those are things we are, you know, we're looking at now. I'll tell my story about the dictionary before we lose. We start talking about other aspects, and that was with the Chinese wiki. I found, and this really comes under the heading of different people working with wikis seem to get different benefits, but with the Chinese wiki, I found if there was a word in one of the Chinese sentences I really didn't know, then what I would do is I would copy the sentence and I would make a dictionary entry out of it. And, you know, I'd say, right, you know, this word, it means this, and then here's the example. And if it was a difficult word, you know, there may have been a couple of examples, something like that. But the interesting thing was that, of course, by the time I'd done all of that, guess what? I knew the word. So you know, that. So actually, I think that is an aspect that comes through on several occasions. I think when we asked Bin Qian to talk about the Chinese thing, there are sometimes some quite unexpected benefits that people get out. So sometimes, actually, in that case, it's sort of, actually what you're doing is you're teaching that thing, but you're actually learning by teaching it.
Chris, could you just ask, you sure the dictionary originally had the letters along the top, and then is that a function inside the wiki?
No, that's one that we actually made when we made it. You just really basic sort of HTML. It's actually not as complicated as HTML. We made it, and we actually transferred that system into the Chinese wiki as well. So we use it there as well. Oh well, yes. Well, there's no patent on it yet. So if anybody else wants to do a language wiki, that's the sort of thing that you could pinch quite usefully. Yes.
And given your last observation that it really helped you learn Norwegian.
Actually, Chinese. It was great. Yes. Yeah. Well, it helped me with my Norwegian, but in a very different way, I think. Yes.
Are the students also involved in creating the wiki and the dictionary?
Yes. Not so much the dictionary, but
there are among the texts there are several texts which actually have been written by students, and there is also a page for students to work with inside the wiki. But you know, when the students have done a piece of writing, a text which I think is good and worthwhile, we put it in, and we put also the student's name on it. So it's something which has, in a way, for me, I don't know about the Chinese, but it's kind of grown organically between myself and the students to some extent, which I think was quite positive to get the students involved in it as well, and they seem to enjoy it. So
I think that is I think that is true to say of the Chinese wiki as well. But with the Chinese wiki, that worked very differently, because what we were actually doing is there were 3 different people, so 1 lecturer and 2 Chinese students, who were sending in large numbers of sentences, and they then needed to be put in the different parts. Sorry, Clive, are you going to?
That's just really what you just said there. Yes. It's about how you manage that process. When you've done wikis as a student, it can get a bit chaotic and everyone's trying to edit stuff and all that. I kind of guess from all your stories there, you've got quite a strong editorial
Oh yes, and the students cannot actually access the body of the wiki itself, because if they could do that, then we would end up with a terrible mess.
We do it with access rights. So within the wiki, there are some areas they can edit and some they can't.
Yeah.
And so a student text would start life in the editable section, but then once it had been fixed, it would be moved into the main body. Like
But
that.
we do that, Chris or I do that. We don't let the students
No.
into the main body, because that would create chaos.
That's always worries me about Wikis.
Yeah.
The idea that you all go,
No, there are certain things that they can't do. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we've probably... I'm struggling to think of any aspect of the Norwegian one we really should tell you about. There probably are, but there's nothing coming to mind. Fire away, Helga.
The project that they have with the students, the assignments, do they actually do it on the wiki or do they download
You
it?
can show them the student material
Yeah,
section, yes.
it's possible to work either way. Actually, it doesn't matter. So, certainly with the Norwegian students, on occasion we had them doing the text actually into the wiki. With the Chinese, 2 out of 3 people actually just send emails or anything. It doesn't matter. The other person works directly into the wiki. There is a slight benefit which I'll try and remember to show you later, because if you work straight into the wiki, you can see anything that's been fixed. So any change is very clear, and you can do that, say, using something like track changes in Word, but it's actually rather a nice little feature. But we're total liberals over that. People work however they like, using whatever tools they give, as much as they like. I must say, on the Chinese front, I have been amazed by the hard work that has happened within the environment, because it's not unusual for me to open my email and to find that somebody has sent me 20 pages of Chinese grammar. And this is marvellous. I absolutely love it, and that's why I'm able to stand here showing you a Chinese wiki, which only started in December, because we've had some, although the structure is extremely liberal, we've had some really hard workers. So I think maybe let's have a bit of a look at Bridge to China,
Yeah, I think so,
but
yes.
we can easily come back to the Norwegian wiki if there's anything we've forgotten to talk about, and quite possibly, as we have a look at the Chinese one, there will be there'll be things where we're thinking, oh yes, this is very different from how the Norwegian wiki worked. So with the Norwegian wiki, there was some amount of community sourcing at work. So that means the students were effectively a member of a community. The reason I put the word crowdsourcing in the title of this talk is that people know what crowdsourcing is. Few people know what community sourcing is, and I didn't want to sort of be opaque. Community sourcing is actually very different. So crowdsourcing is very lightweight. I actually tried to get people to crowdsource Bridge to China, and I failed totally. I had a form on the front page saying, send us a sentence, and nobody ever sent one. So that approach failed completely. We tell it as it is. The community sourcing approach succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, and this was where you brought together a community of people with quite a variety of aims, I would say. Everybody was getting something different out of it. And that, so you really see the difference between crowdsourcing and community sourcing here. So the grammar part of it looks very similar to the Norwegian one. So, you know, we're talking about, well, going by parts of speech which Chinese linguists would probably criticize me for, because, you know, Chinese grammar works in a very different way from Western, the grammar of Western languages. I'm actually really agnostic about this. So I tend to just say, look, if it's going to help somebody to classify it under some bizarre grammatical thing, then I'll do it. But you know, certainly if you compare how Chinese grammar is analysed in the West and how it's analysed in China, it's quite different, and it just gets bottomless. But anyway, we had a go, and you know, some things are very similar, things like nouns. Well, because Bin Qian is sitting here, I think we have to have a look at measure words. So hold tight and we'll do the measure words. So here we have our measure words, and we go in typical wiki fashion, and so we have the alphabetical list. I'm not totally sure this is the best way of doing it, but you know, at the top you have the general measure word, so if you don't know what to do, you count it in go. So that goes right up at the top. But then we have things with a handle will be counted in bar, and glasses will be counted in bay, and is it books? Yeah, books counted in bon. Right. I'm just wondering what is going to be the and so it goes on and on and on. And I must say to you, in Japanese there are also measure words, and also in Korean, and also in the Thai language. So I thought, measure words in Chinese, this isn't a problem, you know. Know about measure words, and oh my goodness, this, you know, it is just horribly complicated. It's the only word for it. But Bin Qian has sent, so this is just one of them, and it's rather a typical page. So very, very systematic, measuring people. For people who speak Japanese, this is quite amusing, because in Japanese this measure word is only used for counting sort of lumps of things like cake. So it's very funny that it's used on people, but never mind. Sometime I'm actually going to have a page of bizarre linguistic things, because you do come across quite a lot of them. Or have we got time? Yes, we have. I was in a restaurant the other day getting a coffee, and just as I stood at the counter, the waitress said to me, "Would you like a bandage?" And I just went into emergency mode and said, "No, thank you," because I haven't the faintest idea what this person is saying. So I'm just going to say this sort of thing so that I can escape. And the Spanish speakers here will probably realise what the issue was, because of course in Spanish bandeja means a tray. I went away and I sat down to drink my coffee, and I then had hysterics because I realised why she'd said this wonderful sentence. And we are actually at some point going to collect things like that. We will have a website which will include a page on magnificent misunderstandings like that. And now, right, I think probably this is a good time for me to ask Bin Qian, what did you get, because you sent us a lot of stuff on measure words, didn't you? And what did you get back?
And actually this is quite interesting work to do with the bridge to China. And maybe it's because Chinese is my first language, so normally we just speak it out and we don't think why it is, and about the grammar and about the words we use. So when I am involved in doing the measure words, I actually found lots of difficulties to explain the Chinese grammar. Yes, as you said, teaching is actually learning as well. So I think I did so many measures, and at the same time I learned lots of things that I didn't thought that I can't learn. So it's quite interesting.
So in other words, what was going on in Binqian's case was that by looking at Chinese and collecting examples, lots and lots of examples of one particular part of the grammar, she was actually learning how her language worked, and so that, which actually is a very useful thing to do, because, you know, for example, if you are going to teach Chinese as a foreign language, for example, then that's something you'd really, you know, what you don't want to be doing is standing there saying, well, in English we just say it that way. Well, why? Oh, I've not the faintest idea. No, that, you know, not that approach. You actually have to be able to say the reason why you're talking about a cat, not the cat, is this. You know, you actually need to be able to do that, and I feel that, you know, that was one thing that was happening. But I should compare you with your classmate, because Ting Jiang also helped, but she helped lots and lots of Chinese structures, so rather a different approach. Same quantities, but just you know, many more parts of the grammar. There, and I'm struggling to remember, I think it was Ting who said it, because of course what happens is that when the examples come in, they come in with an English translation. So, you know, it will be coming in saying something like, "一个朋友," a friend. So you always have the translation. So with the Chinese, it's always three versions. It's the original characters, it's the pinyin, which is the romanization, and it's the English translation. And of course, if incorrect or different or unusual English comes in, it gets fixed. So strangely enough, I think probably the Chinese students were using it as a way of learning English as well. And I tried to be quite creative, so I wouldn't just say, no, we don't say that. I would say, well, yeah, that would work if you were watching a play, or it might work in this situation, but really, you know, this is the one we really want, and this is why. So I tried I put quite a lot of effort into that. I regarded that as important.
Yeah.
Okay, and we now need to find another measure word. Actually, probably we go to another part of the grammar. Oh, yes. Right, so we're going to do hai pa, which means to be afraid of something. And one of the examples that came in, I don't know whether you can see this, is I'm afraid of the dark. Now, if somebody had come along to me and said to me, draw a picture of to be afraid of the dark, I would have said, go away. There's just, how would you draw a picture of being afraid of the dark? And as you can see, one of the artists who got involved with Bridge to China actually managed it. So right at the beginning of the process, to be absolutely honest with you, because you tend to have a list of essential and desirable things in the project. You know, there were certain things that I would have had as essential, some as desirable, and some would have been under the category, well, I don't think that's much use, but if you really want to. And if I tell the truth, the artwork was under the category of, I don't think that's much use, but you can if you want to. And it's transformed it, because two different artists have put a huge input in. You know, apparently there are Chinese people who visit this wiki just to look at the pictures, because some of them are just absolutely staggering. So it's great to be wrong, is the conclusion there. Fire away, Ramona.
I just wanted to say, this is a web page, not a wiki, right?
Oh no, it's a wiki.
It's a wiki.
Yeah, it's a wiki. Yeah. I mean, the difference is that if I spot an error in this, all I do is edit and I fixed it. You know, you can just expand these things as quickly as you can type. If people are very keen, perhaps, because I did do a lot of wiki training, so if you were thinking of setting a language wiki up, you'd get me back doing that without much difficulty, actually. And I'm sort of feeling twitchy at the moment, want to set up a new language wiki, so, you know, if there are a couple of people out there wanting to do it, then now's a really good time. Yes.
So these are UCL based. If we are doing things outside of UCL, we need to use something else, right?
Yes. If you're based in UCL or CES, you can use this. Other institutions will have, usually a lot of other organisations do run wikis. What I would say is I actually considered using various wikis before I decided on our UCL one. And I just took one look at MediaWiki markup and said, no, I don't want to use that. It's just so complicated. The Confluence markup I can teach you in about a quarter of an hour. It's just lovely. So.
I used PBWiki.
Oh.
You set up a wiki in a couple hours. You got it up and running.
Right. Yes, we probably. We probably should have that conversation later, because there will be situations when I mean, my wiki of preference is Confluence, it really is, but it would be very useful to be aware of wikis that could be used outside UCL if necessary. Yes.
Is there anything you would like to have been able to do that the wiki format hasn't allowed you to do?
There's very little that comes. Oh, yeah. Ideally, and it's actually not a problem with the wiki, I would have liked to have had people in Beijing able to go into our wiki and edit things, and it is possible, but you have to give them UCL accounts, and it just becomes too much of a.
That's not a wiki problem.
No, it isn't. It isn't a wiki problem. And the thing there is. Frankly, the system is so easy to use that I'm not going to make a fuss about it, and you know they can send me emails, they can write on papyrus, they can do whatever they like. You know, you know the difficult thing is just getting hold of the material. Getting it into this thing is easy.
Okay, then related to that, if you did want to make it more widely accessible, is it easy to export the contents of the wiki to?
It does export in various formats. However, what would be the issue there would be just having to re-establish all the photos. So I have to admit, I don't like the idea of having to move it into another environment. Is nasty to me, because I'd have to be sitting there adding pictures to all of these pages, and I've got all the pictures, but it would be it would be unpleasant. But what I would do is I would just bury myself in it, and you know, just like Excel, you know, you just bury yourself in it and you don't come out until it's done, and you're probably walking around like this for a week afterwards. But yeah, if it ever happens that it will be done all together. That you wouldn't want to be doing little bits of it, you just do the entire thing.
But just to export the structure, though, it's not images.
Yes, I mean you'd get most of it into other structures very quickly, but as I say, the bit I wouldn't like would be marrying up each example to each picture, because there are a lot of pictures in here already. I have already identified that in the long term that could be an issue, but yeah, nothing is perfect.
Okay. Could I listen to some sound?
Yes. Now there is actually no sound yet in the Chinese one, and before we leave it, I'll also just quickly show you another gap. Let's see if I can show you that, because you see, with the Norwegian one, we were really blessed with all of those texts. With the Chinese one, all we have is one text so far, which is about the glorious occasion when I got the tone wrong and ended up talking about porridge instead of meat. in the classroom, and I got a very strange conversation with the teacher who was saying, but if you put the porridge on the plate, it will flow over. You know, what's the point in doing that? So one of the great things about learning Chinese is that you make huge, horrendous mistakes, very, very funny, and often very, very rude. Often. So that's one reason why I always recommend people to learn Chinese, because the mess up factor is about 20 times most of the other languages I've learned. So yeah, it really, yeah, that's so yeah. So at the moment, anyway, the only text we have is this one. So what's happened is that the commitment of doing conversations and text has been too much for this crowdsourcing model. So I'm looking at other ways of filling that hole, because we're now at a situation where for the rest of the system to develop, it would be really good to have text, because then I can sort of say, right, you know, Bin Qian's measure words explain this, that and the other in the text, you know, that's part of it done. And then it would be a matter of marrying up texts to all of this grammar work that we've done. Okay, now I've lost my train of thought. Were we going back into the Norwegian? We were for sound.
Well, that's just me reading.
Yes. Well, no, but again, it's dead easy. So all you do is just read a Norwegian or a Chinese passage into the MP3 recorders that the Language Centre has, and then attach it to the wiki, and that's it. Just easy peasy. And let's try and find. Recently I was revising Norwegian, and I actually went through all the ones which had sound files as a quick revision. And now it's a memory test to try and work out which ones. Oh yes, this one is magnificent. Yes, this is a glorious story. I don't know whether it'll actually play, but let's have a go. I think we've actually no sound, but it is playing, it's just we can't hear it. Ah, there we are.
Håret hennes var grått, og hun hadde på seg grå kåpe, enten det var sommer eller vinter. Bena hennes var vonde, så hun gikk sakte og stoppet ofte. Hunden hennes, Rex, var også liten og tykk.
That really is a very funny story, which I will tell you later over the drinks if you'd like to hear. Right, now, anything we have forgotten to say, because we are starting to time out?
It would be nice to scroll up.
Oh yes, I mean, this gives you an idea. So that's a bottle of poison.
We had great fun with this at the summer school at Oslo University. We actually acted this story. Yes.
I mean, it would have been very nice to have had a wiki with video files in it. Yes, that would be really worth doing. It talks to YouTube absolutely beautifully. So if we go to the pronunciation section, which is, I think, lurks within grammar, if my yes. So there's quite a lot done by various people on there used to be Norwegian pronunciation YouTube. There it is, and there are there are some people. I actually ended up having an email discussion with the person who did these videos. Eventually, I was trying to encourage her to do some more, but yeah. So it will talk to YouTube, or you can just stick some file that people can read, probably MOV or WMV or something like that in there. Although if we stick large files in there, we may get in trouble. So tread a little bit carefully. But yeah, certainly it is possible. Yeah. Oh, what we do need to say is just whether there are questions about any aspect of what any of the three of us have said. That is an important aspect.
Are you planning to have extra wikis?
Yes, absolutely.
On what basis you decide? Is it because
Oh, it's who manages. It's really first come, first served. I mean, I have to admit there are one or two languages that I'd really like to do, and I won't tell you what they are because it's not fair. Also, we have to be a little bit careful, because I remember at one stage there was a problem with Polish. I think it was because there are a lot of accents and they weren't displaying very well in the wiki, so we'd have to sort of do a sort of a technical check. And the other one actually for us is with Arabic.
I would love to suppose to work on something like this.
Right, well that's a very interesting offer, but it sounds as if somebody's got the first offer in. Good. Now, but there is a technical issue here, because of course we have to be sure that the Arabic text will go backwards correctly, but that's something we can test very quickly. I haven't done that test, but it would take me about 5 minutes to check. You just copy something out of Wikipedia, dump it in the wiki and hope. Yeah.
Who's the audience for the Bridge to China?
Bridge to China is basically designed at good relations between China and the UK. It's basically designed for people learning Chinese, but it's interesting because Chinese people do seem to be using it to learn English as well, and for other reasons. I think certainly perhaps the artists I think they like drawing, so this is a place where they can draw, and it ends up online and it ends up being useful. I should say we looked at so there are two artists involved there. One of them does cartoons like I'm Afraid of the Dark, and the other one does landscapes. And so on the Bridge to China publicity materials, which I had done when I was in Beijing recently, we used the landscapes. So we've got some advertising. That's still sort of saying send us a sentence, which nobody ever does. So what I actually have to do is have quite a long conversation with a Chinese person, at the end of which you then find often that they send you lots and lots of stuff, but you have to sort of convince them that there's some sort of interesting thing about it. I like to think it's rather like the Digital Linguist Network, in that that's about community as well, and wikis tend to be about community.
Sorry, is it because the audience, it's difficult to find the audience to respond? Because I've never seen any of that, because I'm sure if I see something like this, and somebody suggested contribution of any kind, I would love to do that. So it's quite possible that the audience is not there because
the psychology of it is quite interesting. Certainly, bizarrely, so far, I have found it easier to get people to contribute huge amounts of stuff than to get people to contribute just a little bit. And I admit to you quite freely that doesn't make any kind of sense at all, and I can't explain it. But that is the experience.
Well, I don't have time to be brief, kind of thing,
I think the word addictive has already been used. I think that really there is something quite addictive. We all get hooked.
Did you get any feedback from any users, or is it too early?
We've had very little feedback for Bridge to China, but that's because it's very it's very new. On the other hand, Bridge to China has a nice address, bridgetochina.org.uk. The Norwegian Wiki, you really have to know where it is to find it.
Can you not change that?
You can Google
Could change it. Yeah, we could change it.
You can Google it.
Yeah, you can. Yes, it comes up on Google. Yeah, but it would be nice to have something like norwegianwiki.org.uk, which at the moment we don't have.
Could you click on that link so I can imagine where you end up? Where do you get to if you click on that link, Bridge to China?
Oh, you get to us. I set
to
that
the
up.
wiki.
Yes.
You get to the UCL wiki.
Yes.
So then you have to log in as a UCL person.
No. Actually, this goes back to a decision which we asked for with the Norwegian one, because originally the Norwegian Wiki was a closed system. It was UCL only, but then we got special permission to open it up until what was it, on the 5th of August?
Something like
August.
that.
Yes, that's
a couple
right.
of years ago, and it's still open for everybody.
And as you can see, we're still standing here.
Yes.
We are
So anyone can open it and
Yes.
look at it, but you have to have a special password, UCL password, in order to edit
Yes.
or do something with it. Yes.
So it's actually it may be the largest Norwegian open source resource in the world. I don't know of a bigger one. And in the Chinese sector, there are a lot of players, and actually Oxford has a very, very fine grammar, but it's very boring. And to be honest, because of your work, there are some sections. The measure word section in Bridge to China is better. So, but it is the. But if you have a system where people can easily just put the information, it grows very quickly. And now it's just a matter of planning and saying, okay, what are the areas which need help? And by far the most important area is sort of conversations and texts in the Chinese case. And then as regards feedback on the Norwegian wiki, then from the students, I suppose.
Yeah, they seem to like it. At least they speak highly of it, and they enjoy it, and they enjoy putting their own texts to it as well. So I think it's basically been successful.
Have we ever had any feedback from outside UCL on the Norwegian? No, I think for that you probably do have to have
We do need to do something there. Yes. I think DLN is interested in doing that, opening up.
Yes.
And advertise it
is.
so that people everywhere can find it. Actually.
I mean, it's certainly interesting that DLN had a look at, people look at it and say, it's a very, very good platform for doing other things, because, it sort of forces you to be very logical, hierarchical, put things in the right place, and that then can be turned into other media quite easily. Okay, well, perfect timing. This is exactly when we're expected downstairs for the drinks, and I am afraid a little bit of light furniture moving, because the people in there before us set it all out in lines of chairs, so we'll have to sort that out. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed it. Now I have to figure out how to turn it